Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the next episode of the Life Success Legacy Podcast. I am Chris Bay, joined by two of our team members. I've got Mike Kwong and Michael Crawford. Gentlemen, how are you this morning?
Nice. Good.
Doing well?
Well,
Kwong, how you doing down there with all the weather passing through the southeast?
We are actually in pristine weather. You know, it's a bit eastwards that's really catching the brunt of it. My brother's over in Florida, and virtually the whole state is in emergency mode. You know, yeah, the kids are out of school for the week and they're just bracing down. So prayers out to them. You know,
Absolutely. And to our listeners, our friends, our clients who have been impacted by these weather events, our hearts and prayers are with you. We think about you. We worry about you. I texted one of our clients just the other day and said, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And she said, "I am this time, but several weeks ago we got hit." So, yeah, it's parts of our country. I mean, it's like that around the world. You know, people experience these kind of situations, and we just want to let them know we're thinking and praying for them as they go through this, for sure. Okay. Today we want to jump into a topic that came up actually as a question in one of our recent boot camps. And it's a fantastic question and has many facets to it. And so we're going to, from our perspective, pull out little angles and approaches to this topic. The topic is, but I don't need death benefit. Okay. So when Nelson Nash was creating or discovering the infinite banking concept, he was in a situation in life where interest rates had shot way up, and he had some loans out on some investments, some property. He was into forestry and had some land, and interest rates shot way up. And he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And that wasn't the only issue he was facing at the time. If you read Nelson's book, he was in one of those moments where life happens. You know, when life hits us. And that happens to all of us. We coach our clients through those situations all the time. And what he discovered is he had some whole life insurance policies that he could get access to at a lower and different kind of interest rate than what he was having on his loans. His problem that he ran into, he just hadn't put enough into them. Mm-hmm. So he started thinking about, how can I get more money into them, right? So you could use other financial vehicles to create your own IBC system. You could use a savings account. You could use a 401k or a Roth or something like that. But it's not going to be as efficient as using a specially designed whole life insurance policy. And when we say that, we're not even talking about the death benefit directly. It is indirectly a part of it, obviously, because it's life insurance, but we're not talking about it directly. The Mike Kwong, what did you say about the death benefit? It's almost like it's a byproduct. It's icing on the cake.
Yeah, it's dessert at the end of the meal. It's just an extra, and I don't mean to, make it sound unimportant or kind of like a afterthought, but it doesn't have to be the main driver of your reason to purchase, an IBC policy. It's just one of the, many benefits that, accrue to it. Yeah.
So let's just think a little bit from clients that we've spoken with and just from our experience. What would be the mindset for someone who says, but I don't need death benefit? Where are they in life, or what is their thought process when they think, I just don't need life insurance? I'll start off with one example. Some folks, my parents, who don't utilize IBC, which is fine, but they would like to leave a financial legacy.
Mhm.
They say that they are self-insured. They figure they've got enough assets for themselves to live their life and then also be able to pass along a legacy in some financial form. My way of thinking is, and I will say, and I think they limit their expenditures because of that.
Yeah.
They might do things differently than they do now if they knew they could spend down their assets and still have a death benefit for that financial legacy piece. So that's just one example. What are examples that you guys hear or think about?
I'll say, oftentimes, the person may be younger. They don't have a significant other, no plans, for children, or they live their own life, and, for the most part, independently. And it's so far away anyhow, that thought of a death benefit. It's not something that they think about. So, and that can change though, in a short time, And people also think about, well, a death benefit's for an individual, right? And maybe I don't have an individual particularly that I, am so caring about at the moment, but it could also extend to institutions, churches, schools, hospitals. You want to talk about that, Crawford?
Yeah, no, I think we hear people talk a lot about getting in the ruts, honestly, about life insurance. And, we can do so much other stuff. We can do it with our savings account, or you can utilize, whatever. And Nelson even indicated in his book, there are multiple ways you can do infinite banking. It is just happens to be that, whole life insurance re-engineered the way we do is the best tool because of the factors that Chris talked about earlier. Some of what you just talked about now, Mike, is like the functionality within the contract of that policy itself. And as we already stated, the death benefit is the sidecar. It's the dessert at the end of the meal, you said. And ultimately, people get really stuck in their head. I just had a conversation with some friends the other day who are starting to get a little more interested in IBC because they're frustrated with their traditional investments. And they were like, but we just don't understand, you're talking about reducing the base, which is what buys the death benefit. And I was like, well, yeah, because we need the cash today. Everett used to say we need cash from today till the day we die. And those who we love and care about are the ones that get the death benefit. And so to your point, to both of your points, I think what we hear most from people is that short-term thinking, the in the moment, the what's next week's dinner plan look like type of planning, right? Rather than that long-term generational thinking that Nelson is really trying to help us get our brains to shift into that gear.
Yeah, and you mentioned something, when you talk about the dichotomy of cash value and death benefit, as if they are unrelated or contrapositioned. Actually, they work very, closely together and intimately tied, mathematically. People don't understand that. They think that if I have more of one, I have to have less of the other, or vice versa. And it's not that simple, right? Because of the instrument that a contract of life insurance is. Right. They're intimately related in that if you think about a policy, the death benefit is going to be ultimately the capacity of that policy. From day one, you have that protection, which is great, but into the future. And then you also have, if you put PUA in, you're going to have some starting cash value. That's like the equity in your policy. And you have to understand, I use this analogy, and I have a plant here and here to show. I tell folks, when you start a plant off, you put a seed in the soil. It's not exciting until it germinates. And then by then, you're capitalized and it starts growing out. Well, the plant's only going to grow to the size of the pot that you put it into. Right? And if you have a small pot to start with, it never grows, like a term policy where the death benefit's static. You're only going to go so far, and you'll hit that soon. But with a whole life, a good one, the death benefit and the pot grows. And that root system is going to be chasing down the walls of that pot over time. So again, you're right. It is kind of into the longer term thinking, but it absolutely does impact the cash value too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's just such a hurdle to get over for people in their brains because of what we've been taught about life insurance as a product, I'm not even talking like whole life or term. I'm just saying universally, people think of life insurance as the thing your grandparents or your parents buy you when you're a kid, and you just ended up inheriting the premium at some point because they handed it over to you and you don't know a thing about it.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was a little bit of me. Whenever I was 18, my dad handed over a very small, whole life policy that he and my mom had bought on me when I was a child. And I was like, what is this? And it cost me, and it's so cheap, it's $180 a year.
Mhm.
But at the time I was 18 years old. I was like, why am I paying $180 a year for something that I don't care about?
Right.
I have zero into, I don't care. I'm not going to die. I mean, like I'm getting grass, but like ultimately, that's, you kind of mentioned this earlier, Mike. I don't know if it was offline or not, but like people just are like, young people, especially at that time when I was 18, 19, I was like, I'm not dying. Like, what are you talking about? I'm immortal.
Just got by bad
Yeah.
last night.
And I think ultimately you even said something that made me really think about a good way to describe term life insurance. You were saying that term is inside of this pot and it can't it's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing about a plant, and I'm not a plant person, but my mother-in-law is trying to teach me, is that if a plant is in a pot for too long without being replanted or resoiled, what happens to it? It dies. And term is just like that. It stays in a pot for so long and then it wilts away and it's over. Whereas whole life insurance, as you described, it grows and continues to expand with as is necessitated in order to accommodate that growth. And that's a beautiful example.
Yeah. Thanks.
Kwong is the king of analogies.
I know. I've got to step up my game a little bit.
Yeah, I'm feeling, yeah, he's pretty impressive with the ideas that he comes up with. There's probably a good analogy in this as well when we talk about whole life and other ways, and the relationship between the death benefit and the cash value. It's almost like trying to separate the equity in a home from the value of the home.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't do that, right? And the amount of equity that you can ever have is limited by the value of the home.
Yep.
So if you have a small home that isn't worth as much on the market, you can only get so much equity.
Yep.
Right. Whereas if you have a large home that has a high value, you've got a lot of room to build that equity.
Yeah.
And in a good school district, right? That's appreciating, over the
years. Yeah.
There's multiple factors. And I think that that's one of the things that I always try to explain to people as simply as I can, because again, it's easy to get into a situation when you're talking to a potential client or something to like, Mary calls it word vomiting, where you're just sort of like spewing off facts and stats and information, and all of a sudden you're pelting them, with too much information. And I always try to do what I think Mike Kwong does a really good job of breaking it down into simple terms. Like, do you need to use your cash today? Are there things you can do with your money today that benefit your family in the near future? And always the answer is going to be yes. Then we can talk about, okay, next step, figure out how this plan can actually benefit you down the road, benefit your children. If you don't have children, what's that thing? Right. And we kind of went off the rabbit trail here. It was my fault. But like we talked a little bit about, if you don't have kids, what could that be? And it could be an organization, a thing that you're passionate about, something that you care deeply for. There are ways to utilize the death benefit for things that matter to you. Mm-hmm. But like Mike Kwong was saying, you may not know what those things mean today yet, but it's something you can always modify in your policy down the road. If something in your life changes, you can make that beneficiary something different or add to it or split it up into multiple buckets. But the point is that it's yours to control for the entire life of the policy until you're passing.
I have an example. This is going back quite a few years, but I was associated with a nonprofit organization, and one of their donors wanted to sign over a whole life insurance policy to the nonprofit organization. And they just felt like they didn't need the death benefit anymore. They had what they needed or whatever. So they thought, we're going to sign over this policy to this nonprofit
Mhm.
organization. And when they were doing it, they were thinking from the perspective of when the insured dies, it happened to be the wife, when the wife would pass away, the death benefit then goes to the nonprofit organization. Well, for all of our IBC listeners out there, is it about the death benefit? It's not, right? I mean, it's a great part of it, and that will be a gift sometime down the road. But we actually showed the nonprofit organization how to use the cash value inside the policy for their benefit to cover expenses and investments and things that they were doing inside the organization. So it's both and.
It is. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most powerful aspect of IBC. And we talked about it in a recent podcast, is that yes, you can use a savings account, you can use all these other things, but you interrupt compounding interest anytime you use something that is not whole life. And then, oh, by the way, you get the death benefit. It is an absolute integral but byproduct of this entire process, that even if for all the entire time you did it, all you did was use the cash, build the cash, create cash value, create cash flow, and then we pass, right? We're all going to graduate, and you left the death benefit. Like, holy cow. That to me is just like, you didn't do anything else to earn it. You just made your premium deposits. You used the dollar throughout your entire life, 30, 40, 50 plus years of however long it is since you bought your first policies, right? And boom, at the end, the benefit goes to those who matter most to you, or the things that matter most to you.
And back on that capacity issue, I'm thinking of and for people who might look at a situation and say, they don't really need death benefit, right? I'm thinking of two situations. One I'll talk about is a couple who's never had children.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we don't really have family members to leave the death benefit to or anything like that. But
Right.
this is a couple who has continued to buy policies. And off the top of my head, that's for two primary reasons. Number one, that we've been talking about, and that is they have needed more capacity.
Mm-hmm.
They started with smaller policies. They filled them up. They use them, but they fill them up really quickly. And they're like, we need more capacity to store our dollars. So they've added policies, not for the death benefit, just because they need more capacity, right?
Live life.
Secondly, part of their reason is, and this is, let's just boilerplate across the top. We are not long-term care insurance experts by any stretch. That is not our thing. You need to do your research and talk to somebody else about that. But this couple, part of their approach is they do not have long-term care insurance.
Mm.
And the reason for that is they know that their policies have a rider that they can access up to a certain percentage of the death benefit while they're still living for expenses that they need.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to give people, and different companies have different names for the rider. In this case, it's an accelerated death benefit, and you can get access to money up to a certain percentage of the death benefit in three different categories. I'm just going to tell you that the first is terminal illness,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get up to 75% of the death benefit.
Yeah.
Next is chronic illness, and you can get up to 50% of the death benefit. And then there's critical illness, which is up to 25% of the death benefit. So if I can get up to 50, 75% of my death benefit, and I don't have long-term care insurance or don't want to pay the premium for long-term care insurance, I could just max out, keep bumping up my death benefit, knowing that I have access to a percentage of it if that time comes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about the mindsets of, sometimes people think, well, I just don't need death benefit. And so there's a conversation there. We've talked about the integral relationship in the design of a policy between the financing option with the cash surrender value and the death benefit, and how those are interlocked. We've talked about situations of why clients would add additional policies, even if they don't think they have need the death benefit or don't have beneficiaries or children, et cetera, dependents. And then we've talked about the rider as well and how that can be a tool for people with the living benefits of that as well. Is there anything that we're missing, guys, that you want to make sure we commented on before we wrap this up?
I'll say this, like, I think that one of the reasons we love doing this podcast is because it challenges us to continue rethinking our own thinking, right? And to educate ourselves and work through those Mike Kwong analogies, work through those Mike Everett isms, whatever they are, and and help ourselves as a team be more efficient for our clients and coaches, for our better coaches for our clients, to answer these questions that come up and these concerns, because we ourselves get stuck in our own personal ruts with IBC, right? We see these benefits as just obvious, right? Duh.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm simplifying, but you know what I mean? Like, we kind of almost see them as like, well, clearly this is the coolest thing in the world. Why don't you understand that? And so I think it helps for us to stop and pause a second and really think through the other things that clients might be facing in their lives that we can't see, that we don't experience, that we aren't challenged with.
Or we forget.
Go ahead.
Or we forget sometimes.
Or we forget, exactly. Yeah. And so I think that, like, we love clients that will pose these questions to us and make us think and give us that challenge. But also, we hope that we can bless the clients with these truths as we move things ahead.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I say, rethink your thinking all the time. And that applies to us as coaches. Absolutely 100%,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's great to be reminded, like I was saying, with these questions that, one of our goals, I think what's really important is to try to meet, whoever we meet where they are. Right. Yep. And that comes with a lot of other, preconceptions or things that maybe they've been told and yep. haven't really thought through yet, or they haven't had the life experience to understand how important something may be. So I find a lot of fulfillment in talking with people about things like that, outside of just the specifics of, the policy yeah. itself. I love, as a financial engineer, I joke, right? Right. There's also the life aspect to it too, yeah. which is really more important, really.
Right. Well, and we're grateful for these types of questions that come out in our boot yeah. camps, because they give us material for our podcasts, right? Whenever we're sitting in a boot camp and someone poses an interesting or new question, we're like, oh, mark that. We need that one for a podcast. That's good. If you've never participated or attended one of our boot camps, they're free. You can find them on our website, lifesuccesslegacy.com. Go to learning events and you can see there's a sequence to them. We would recommend you first attend a webinar. That is about a 70 to 80 minute live. Really, it is a review of the major key concepts within Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, which, if you haven't read it, we recommend you get a copy of this either off of our website or Amazon or wherever you can get yourself a copy. So the webinar really highlights some of the key concepts in the book. And then the boot camp is 3 hours. It's 2.5, 3 hours, and it is a deep dive. The first probably half of it is us teaching and giving examples and touching on different learning styles so that everyone can walk away with a good understanding of how IBC works. Yep. But then the second half of it is 100% Q&A. It is questions from the participants. And that is actually, I think, even more valuable and more fun for us because we never know what questions are going to be asked. And we always tell people, if we don't know the answer to it, we're not going to make something up. We'll research it and come back and address it maybe in a podcast. Yep. But the Q&A section to me is just fantastic that we get to do with folks. So, yeah. All right. To our listeners, thank you all for joining us once again. We hope you will continue to come back. If you have a topic or a question that you would like to have answered, let us know. shoot it in the comments and let us know. We would be happy to answer or drill down and learn ourselves, because we're constantly learning right alongside you. It's truly a mastermind. It's a community of like-minded people just sharing information and all. So thanks again for joining us, and check us out at our next episode of the Life Success Legacy Podcast. Thanks, guys.